guess as Rose was saying, everyone here is in a way highly familiar with partnering with other organisations and company in the making of their work. So yeah, in thinking about this, I was also trying to think about what would be an interesting point of discussion for us, or for me, you know, to kind of consider. And I guess the Theatre Forum for us is a unique opportunity to reflect on, you know, what happens when we're partnering with other people and what we think we can do in the future to improve them. So with that interest in mind, I would like to talk about a particular experience of partnering that I've had between my company, The Border Project, which is a small emerging key org and a maker of contemporary work, and with the Sydney Theatre Company, which is Australia's largest theatre company. So in terms of scale, they don't get much further apart. And while for both of us we had, as organisations, kind of clear ideas of what the project was and why it was exciting about our two organisations coming together to work on it, the project didn't quite go as either of us had hoped in the actual doing of it. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to reflect with you in this collegial context, like we're, you know, having a little glass of wine, except there's only, you know, 250 of us, to talk about some of the difficulties that we encountered when these two very different companies and practices came together, and obviously to talk about, from my perspective, things that, like, I've thought about and we've thought about since that we would do differently, and indeed just or even be aware of before kind of engaging in partnerships like this in the future. So, you know, pick up your imaginative glass of wine and here we go. So I guess some like needed backstories that you all know about, obviously who the Sydney Theatre Company is. Joe kind of briefly described what the Border Project is. We're a collaboration between 6 artists, and we have a focus on making contemporary work which is playing around with the sort of future language or format of what a theatrical event can be, and playing around with how we can mess with the way that normally works. And we're also really passionate about engaging people of our generation and younger who don't go to traditional theatre, and our work often has very unconventional formats, and often is inspired by other forms from popular culture that we kind of draw upon and use them to be the structure of work, be it a kind of an interactive experience, which is what we're doing at the Mob House, or we did a show that was like inspired by a kind of board game which went for 4 hours and you could have a drink and come and go. And so we've kind of pursued those sort of ideas in our background. And an example of one of the shows that we made is called Highway Rock and Roll Disaster. And this was actually presented by STC in their Wharf Too Loud program. And Highway Rock and Roll Disaster was kind of like a collection of music videos that were performed live, and the show was made from sort of pop songs that each member of the company had a strong personal memory attached to. So we had made and produced this show independently, and had performed it a couple of times, and then it was presented by STC in that program. And it was our first time in Sydney, and we had like really incredible responses to the show critically, and we didn't have like massive houses or anything, but it was a kind of a real success. And I think both the Border Project and STC got quite excited about what we might be able to do in that space in the future. So that led to us forming a co-production. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about what the co-production was. The show was a version of the Scottish play, and I won't tempt fate, as I'm in a theatre, to name it. I'll, you know, had enough of that. So, and the concept of the show was that that everything that went wrong from first rehearsal to final curtain would be documented and integrated into the show itself. So we wanted to kind of interrogate the history of the play as a play that's got a legacy of superstition and prone to kind of accidents. So we wanted to both restage all of the historical accidents connected to the text, but also stage all the things that went wrong for us. And in a way, we wanted to use those mistakes and misfortunes as our way of staging the story of McChops. And so, obviously, you know, that could be caught in disaster as a concept, but I'll leave that to you to judge. And so what happened was we had developed this concept for a work, and we took the idea to SCC because we actually, one of our company members, Cameron Goodall, had just become part of their new permanent ensemble, The Residents. So we were like, awesome, this makes total sense. It would be really, really exciting for us to work with STC again. Cam's part of that ensemble. That ensemble had I guess a kind of focus on how they would work together and the kinds of work and the way they might collaborate. So that's kind of how it came to about. And I think the idea of the exchange between the companies felt very clear for us that that we would be able to have this opportunity to work with a larger group of actors, work with another ensemble, for us to be able to kind of deliver on some of these big ideas that were in the project, and STC kind of provided a scale in that way for us that would be otherwise impossible. And I think STC with us was interested in us bringing our contemporary making processes and unconventional approaches to making work to both their new ensemble and the more experimental wing of their programming. And I think Kate and Andrew have been so amazing in kind of embracing the kind of opportunities to do things like this, and are so open to kind of going out to things like this. So I guess so kind of what were some of the things that were problematic that I guess neither of us were fully aware of until we were sort of into the process. And obviously I have to preface this is all from my personal perspective, so I'm sure if Kate or Andrew or Tom Wright were here, they would have their own set of things to say about, what it means to bring kind of these organisations together. But I think the key thing for both of us that we didn't quite consider was, while it was a co-production in principle that would be bringing together the methodologies of the two organisations, I think in practice it wouldn't actually end up happening that way. And that's actually, in a way, something that we inadvertently probably courted in the way that we set up the relationship. But STC's methods were the way that things ended up having to be done, and it kind of wasn't possible once the project was underway to be able to shift outside of that. And that, as I said, we kind of solicited that. So we're like, oh yeah, we awesome. We can, we can have all the production management of the show managed by STC, and we can rehearse there and all of that kind of stuff. So in that partnership, it meant that from that point, we were kind of having to work within the system of this big hierarchical organisation. And I guess also, this is maybe a slight tangent, but I think implicit to, I guess, the way that STC works is that understandably, as the kind of peak national organisation, there's a feeling that it operates in a kind of a peak or zenith of what theatre practice and production is. And I think it's actually quite interesting that in a way STC is more the weirdo in the national landscape. Like most organisations in this country aren't actually constructed with these giant kind of hierarchies and departments, and but a lot of new work that's being made is being made in a very, very kind of compacted situation. So I think that's just an interesting consideration. Whilst it was obviously completely not the intention in practice, the process of making the show became about us having to come into line with those kind of methods and kind of in a way fitting into that kind of hierarchy. And that's kind of quite interesting when you consider, let's say, a company like the Border Project has a very decentralised DIY background, and that's kind of in our DNA as coming from a project-based independent company, where obviously STC has to exist in its own way as through these massive hierarchical machinations which are about departmental gatekeepers and prop makers and all of the kind of scale of the company. And an example of the points where we kind of rubbed up against this hierarchy without realising was one of our designers kind of got sort of taken aside and kind of slightly down-dressed because she had not been communicating to one of the departmental people through her emails about what she was doing with the design, and she was completely unaware of it, and I was unaware of it as well, and without realising it, we'd been kind of offending or kind of unsettling or agitating part of the system there, and because all of the creatives in a way we were new to STC, so we weren't familiar with navigating it as a hierarchy, and so there were points where sometimes it was just our lack of familiarity with the way that it worked that was responsible for how points of tension could erupt. And in retrospect, it would have been fabulous for STC to actually have some real thorough process of, in a way, inducting a company like us into their methodologies, because there's no way to know it until you kind of discover that you're not doing it, and then you've potentially agitated someone and drums can ensue. But I just wanted to maybe sort of finally just sort of now sort of talk about what was sort of problematic on our end at points in the process. And I think, again, without us really realising it, there was a seduction to kind of go out to the bigness of what STC offered us, and ultimately we probably, because of that, bit off more than we could chew, and it meant that we worked with all of the residents, which is 9 actors plus our performers. It was a cast of 12. We went, because of the concept of the show, for these really big production ideas, which were like fabulous and great, but they were about let's have a burning thing that can fall, and let's have dangerous scenery and restaging all of these accents, which of course meant that we then tackled a massive amount of our time dealing with those big production elements. And I guess if I had my time over with the project, I would have probably worked. I would have geared the project to work with a scale that was probably closer to home for us, and maybe, I don't know. I think so. And I think I would have, and I'd structure the process differently, and I'd have the room work differently, and the way we work with the residents work differently. So I have talked about all the problematic things in these partnerships, and of course we've obviously we partner all the time with Windmill and all kinds of people. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I think it's really interesting when going through a partnership or an experience like that. It's actually, out of all of the experiences that I think we've had, one of the most kind of enlightening and kind of, in a weird way, affirming processes, because I think what you do in that situation is you learn about what is the value of the methods and ways that you work, and you can actually see in that interface what can you take from this scale of an organisation that's working in a very different way that does suit you, and what things are actually not beneficial to the production of the work. And I think it also has allowed us to go, we can really centralise what our strengths are as a team, and we can centralise the things that are great for us, and when engaging with a larger partner, draw upon the strengths that that they can bring to us and that we can meet together to sort of delivering our work in hopefully the best possible light. So that's my little rant. Thank you.